Welcome back to another episode, our final one of season 1, to the Rooted and Rested podcast. This is a podcast where we dive into all things related to mental health, physical health, somatics. I'm a trauma-informed coach. I specialize in somatics and surroundings for businesses and leaders and women who carry a lot. And I spend my time coaching. I have a group coaching program. I do one-to-one coaching, and I also go into homes. We have an incredible amount of incredible guests on this season that I'm super thankful for coming on here and talking to me. This is going to be a solo episode, just me. So we're going to talk about the hidden impact of our environments on stress, burnout, and health. And it's a really fascinating topic because it's really encompassing of what I do. It is the sort of summation of my vibe, my core messages, the things I'm most passionate about. It is the somatics and the surroundings, how they work together, how the nervous system is constantly responding to those surroundings that we live and work and exist in as we go through our daily life. So again, I think many people are trying to heal. They're trying to rest and they're trying to regulate themselves in spaces and surroundings that their nervous system are experiencing as stressful. And it can be a huge contributing factor to how well they operate and how well they cope and how well they function in daily life. Because stress is often spoken about psychologically, we don't realize how much the body is constantly responding to our spaces and our surroundings as well. So today we're going to talk about nervous system impact of our environments, why some spaces feel restorative and some feel exhausting, how overstimulation can affect the body, and why women struggle to fully relax in their own homes. And also the connection between our surroundings, our stress, burnout, and nervous system health. Because our environments, our surroundings, the spaces that we operate in, they are never neutral. They are constantly communicating with the body. And it really does baffle me how few people in this world, the coaching world of somatics and trauma-informed coaching and, business coaching, executive coaching, mindset coaching, all the different kinds of coaching you can get, how few people have connected the dots to the spaces and the surroundings that we live in. So I think our bodies respond more than we realize. That is a baseline place to start. Our body responds more than we realize. We think that stress comes from workload, emotions, pressure, difficult situations, and it does. That let's not, belittle any of those things. Of course, yes. But the nervous system is also constantly responding to noise, lighting, clutter, visual overwhelm, pace of life, unpredictability, lack of privacy, digital stimulation, emotional atmosphere, and environments associated with responsibility. So just imagine the office, right? So long before the mind consciously processes a space, the nervous system has already responded to it. And that is why you get weird gut feelings when you go into different kinds of places. Your nervous system has already sussed out what is happening in the space, and you haven't actually processed it. You haven't thought about it. You haven't thought about why, what, you just have a feeling. It's often an icky feeling or oh my gosh, this is heaven feeling. And you don't actually know why. It's not been a thought process. It's just been a gut reaction. So what does that actually mean? We might feel different in different environments. We might feel really calm entering a particular type of hotel. We might find certain rooms feel quite heavy or tense. And some homes just never feel restful. How does our body absorb that atmosphere? Well, it's all about scanning those environments as we move through them. And the way that we interpret whether or not we can relax or we need to stay on alert is this is where the trauma-informed lens comes into its own. We operate, we scan through the lens of our previous story. So if we have walked through things that have been traumatizing or have been difficult, our bodies have learned patterns of how to respond when a similar thing comes along. And sometimes our body misinterprets. There might be a tiny detail that feels similar in a new space. But because there is that tiny thread of familiarity, our body will go into the response it's learned because it likes patterns, and it will respond to that space according to that previous event. And if the previous event brought a stress response, you will have a stress response. And that is why we can walk into certain environments and spaces and feel really uncomfortable, but not really know why. It's why we could walk into a hotel. I mean, so much psychology goes into the design of hotels and retreat spaces and spas. So much psychology because their goal is to trick your nervous system into relaxing. It is to give every possible signal to the nervous systems that walk through that front door that this is a safe place, that they can actually relax, because that will get them good reviews. We'll all want to go there, and it totally works. And actually, it's often right. It often is a place our body will scan and see it to be a place where rest can occur, but it's not always. And I know that for myself, I've often gone, I've talked about it before, on holidays to spa days. I've done a super relaxing package deal, and I've done all the things. I've sat, I've swam, I've had a sauna, I've done a steam room, I've had a nice vegan lunch. I've done all these things, and I am no more relaxed by the end of the day than at the start. And that is because something about the environment or the people or something about the space is triggering a memory or a previous experience that my body is responding to according to that. Either that or it's not had enough time to actually come down. That's often the case with a single day event. But that is why we can walk into certain rooms and we'll feel a heaviness or a tense atmosphere. It's picking up, our nervous system is picking up on things that put it on alert. And it may make no sense. It will if you dig and you find out why the body has learned that response and when it learned that response, what was happening when it learned that response. It will make complete sense, but it isn't rational. So, how many people think they're bad at relaxing when their environment has actually never felt restorative to their nervous system? One thing I often see is women whose homes are stunning, they're beautiful, but their nervous systems don't experience them as restful. Why is that? Why do you think that is? I think for many women, home becomes associated with so many more things than rest. Responsibility, caregiving, mental load, laundry, unfinished tasks, emotional labour, often work if they work at home, overstimulation, being needed, being pulled in 1,000 directions. So they can't, their nervous system cannot find a space in that home, no matter how stunningly beautiful it is, where it knows this is where I relax, this is where I switch off, this is where I come down, this is where I down regulate, this is where I find my baseline. And I think one of the things that I'm very passionate about is helping women understand that they need to protect their peace. They need to protect their rest. It isn't something that you can just sit down and your nervous system gets switched into rest mode because you've sat down, because your nervous system is still knowing that there's dishes in the sink over there, there's laundry over here, you haven't done this, the bins need to go out, and this and that, and there's still like a million things that your brain is trying to think through, and unclosed loops, and your nervous system is still on alert. So one of the things that I love to try and help my clients to do is to start, first of all, rituals are incredibly powerful. If you can come up with a ritual that trains your body and your nervous system that when this happens, whether it's a candle, a song, a book, doing a specific action, usually something physical that involves the senses. More senses, the better, actually. That trains your nervous system to learn, like a dog. When you say this word, it means we do this. It's the same thing. Our nervous system latches on to patterns. It loves patterns. So if you train it to, this candle getting lit and this song coming on means this is happening and I get to down regulate and this is going to be a safe place, then that is a fantastic way to protect your rest. And it means that and particularly if you always do it in the same space that is kept for that. So a little corner in the bedroom where you have a nice comfy chair and you drink the same tea there and you have your blanket and you have your book and you have your candle and this is the somatics. It's the body. How can I train my body where my nervous system lives to allow my nervous system to down regulate? There's so many things you can do. As inside of my program, we have a weekly teaching, and every week there's a regulation practice for people to put into place, into practice in their daily life. And so many of those practices are little mini rituals that you can take with you into daily life, whether it is in the office or doing your daily tasks or first thing in the morning or when you do your workout or whatever it is. There is a practice every week that is to do with training your nervous system to down regulate. So some women don't rest at home because psychologically they never feel fully off duty to relax. You've probably seen online that funny meme that's been going around for a long time now about how, a woman's brain is basically like 47 tabs that are open and each of them has a different playlist going all on at the same time. I fully relate to that because I do feel like that is what my brain is like. We see tasks everywhere. And we have very blurred lines between all of the tasks and between all of the different compartments that we operate in. And particularly if you work from home, which I do, it becomes very difficult to compartmentalize parts of our life and to train our brains and our nervous system to understand I'm here for this now, but then I'm not anymore here. We have constant visual reminders of our work, of our responsibilities, and we have like sensory fatigue from all of that. I know for me, one of the things that I find hardest, I noticed this even yesterday, I jumped right in, I was in the zone, working the flow, I was working on meta ads, and got to about 11:30 in the morning, and I suddenly went, oh crap, I haven't taken the chicken out for dinner. And I had to pause my work, go to the kitchen, pull out the chicken, put it on defrost, and then come back and get back onto my ads. And I was like, that's a really weird thing to have to do in the middle of the workday. Like, oh, the chicken. It for a lot of people, even if they did remember the chicken, there's not a lot you can do about it because they're at work, they're at the office, or they're at school, or they're at, wherever they are. For me, I work from home, so I can interrupt myself with a vast array of tasks that I could be doing. And it takes actually a lot of discipline to tell myself, no, I'm going to get to that at 5 or 6 or tomorrow. I've developed all kinds of very micro rituals and coming down exercises to help close all those tabs at the end of the day, because you can't go through life with 47 tabs open all the time. I mean, my laptop drives my children insane because they open it and it's a mess. I know where everything is, but they're like, what is going on here? So really what I'm trying to say here is that a home can look aesthetically pleasing. And as an interior designer, that is important to me. And I will probably do a different episode on this, but we are wired to respond to beauty. So a beautiful home is not just about showing off your show home or splashing your money around or having to have everything perfect. There is something innately beneficial to our soul, our body, our nervous system, our mental health that feeds and responds to beauty. And that is a massive part of my design philosophy. It does not mean it has to be expensive, but it does need to be intentional. And I think that is the key. Beauty, intentional beauty in spaces that function, can really help with regulating your nervous system. Beauty alone does not equal safety, but if you think it through, the function, and you are intentional about it, it really, really can help regulate a nervous system. So what about all these modern environments? I think one of the things that my pet peeve is glossy modern kitchens. If that's your vibe and you like it, don't take this personally. I'm coming at it from a nervous system point of view. Our nervous system is intended to respond to nature. Being in nature, we're seeing nature, having it around us is one of the most impacting things that can happen. This is why everybody tells us to go for mental health walks, because it gets us into nature. Or it should, if you can, if you're not living in a concrete jungle. But having those natural tones, you can see even behind me here, how much of nature I've tried to bring into the design of my own home, because it has an impact on our body, what we visually see, how our nervous system interprets safety. Nature, historically, as humanity, nature has always been safe. It's been a place of safety, not necessarily. I'm not talking about going out into the African bush or the, Amazonian jungle. Those are not safe places for humans to be. But in general, walking around the Cotswold nature, or going on a mountain trail, or European Alps, or many, many, many places around the world, nature is a safe place. It does our mental health, our bodies, our nervous systems, huge amounts of good. And I think modern environments often eliminate that element. So if you think about architecture in the 80s and 90s, it was very concrete, very like all design kind of was removed. If you look at door handles or bus stops, even like bins on the street, or like lampposts, or any of these park benches, that's a big one. You look at the difference between those in the early 1900s and then at the end of the century. They are completely different. All creative, decorative, artistic design was eliminated. Now, I think now things are starting to go full circle and make their way back to that. But I think when I say the glossy modern kitchen, what I mean is nothing about that is natural. So you'll often see it with red or black or like grey, high gloss. It's not that I hate high gloss anything. It's what it represents. It's a highly reflective surface, which is not a natural thing for our eyes. The color usually isn't anything you'd find in nature, and as a material, it's totally man-made. And so it represents to me how much an environment can dysregulate on a micro level sometimes, but all this helps, right? Every little bit helps. It will dysregulate your nervous system because it is a jarring thing to our bodies. So I honestly think that many nervous systems are overloaded long before people consciously realize they're overwhelmed. And it's things like the glossy kitchen that that can really add. It's like adding another piece of straw to the camel, and it will be something that will break the back, but it might not be the glossy kitchen. I don't think that's ever going to break a camel's back, but it's what it represents. These things we're adding in all the time that dysregulate us little by little by little, eventually coupled with all the crazy amounts of stress and emotion and responsibility and overextension that we carry. My business is actually known more for the sort of modern country vibe, which naturally happens when you focus on tones, textures, materials that are more based around nature. You tend to find that it ends up in kind of modern country or Scandi, and that is where my business lives. Modern environments are often much louder. That doesn't mean that they are cluttered. They're often actually very minimalist, but they are noisy because they're loud. It's loud colors, it's loud textures, it's loud materials, and it's very visually saturating. It's also very digitally intrusive. So I'm often called in as a designer to my clients' homes. They often, I cannot tell you how many times I've heard this. They are not clear. They don't understand what went wrong. I actually had a couple of different clients who called me in with a relatively recent project they'd done. Both of them were highly modern, very, very modern. And they were just not happy. They didn't feel like at home in their own home. And they couldn't put their finger on why. They were both very high functioning, fast paced lives, both sets of clients, and they'd just gone for something super minimal. One of them actually was high gloss kitchen, very sort of modern minimalist, lots of grey and white, lots of like just all the modern stereotypical modern vibe. Now, I'm not even against modern design. I think it can be lovely. I'm not against that. But what I think was going on for them both was that their spaces were not giving them any sense of belonging. There was nothing that told a story that their nervous system could feel a sense of belonging in. And that is a huge part of home. That is a huge part of our environments. It's a huge part of nervous system regulation. We all need a sense of belonging. We need a sense of this is where I'm supposed to be. This is where I can rest. This is where I can switch off. This is my place. And you will find that that story is told through the design of the home. Sometimes it's not about the paint color, although that also is hugely impacting. Sometimes it's just about little pieces of decor. People don't understand when they're locked into the modern design world that it's important to tell your story in your home. You're not just a floating brain existing in an unrelated space. You're very, very much in contact and communication with your spaces, and that space needs to communicate to your nervous system that it is safe, that this is where you belong. And I don't find that often in modern, I'm not saying never because it can be done, but I don't find it often in modern design. And so when I had these clients, it was just really clear to me that their space was not telling any kind of story that they were a part of. And so they didn't feel they could relax in it because there was no connection to it. One of the things also in terms of design, the total opposite end of the modern spectrum is the maximalist, very overexpressive design vibe, which I have my own opinions on. I don't personally love it for myself, but I will say that I do follow some accounts on Instagram that do it really well. And I look at it and I think, I love that, but I could never have it in my own home because I know it's totally overstimulating to me. And I think we can often, it takes a lot of skill to do it well. The maximalist vibe is hard to get right because if you don't get it right, you basically just it looks like a mess. It looks like everything just vomited all over your room. But I think it's a really good picture for what our lives often look like. It's hard to match all these things together. And if you don't balance things well, because actually, even inside of a maximalist, insane design proposal, there is a huge amount of intentionality. Nothing is there by accident. Those patterns that sit next to each other have been very, very carefully curated and chosen. And if you get it wrong, it's basically just complete overstimulation. Actually, even if you get it right, it can be overstimulation. But if you get it wrong, it's chronic overstimulation. And if you translate all of those elements that you'd find in that room into what life looks like, you're going to have fatigue sitting next to irritability, sitting next to huge difficulty with concentrating, sitting next to hypervigilance and poor sleep and nervous system exhaustion, emotional overwhelm, inability to switch off, and all of a sudden everything has vomited all over this room. So I think it's a great picture because on the one hand, your body can't down regulate because it can't belong, it can't connect, it has no story, no connection to that space. And on the other hand, it's just like complete overkill and overstimulation. And the body adapts to prolonged activation. So overstimulation eventually starts to feel normal. We talked about this before. This is a really dangerous place to sit in because you are essentially living on an adrenaline high, and that becomes your new baseline. And if you try to come down from that place, first of all, you'll have actual withdrawal. But second of all, it can feel really, really uncomfortable when you shift your baseline. It can feel horrible, and that can feel worse than just staying there. But the long-term effects of living on that level of cortisol flooding your system every day and that level of adrenaline coursing through your body can start to have really detrimental physical effects on your body that have massive health problems attached to them. I think one of the reasons that we don't see this really, for me, it's really obvious connection between spaces and somatics, is because we're actually very disconnected. As humanity, as a species, we are disconnected, despite being more connected than ever. We're disconnected from our bodies. Our physical and mental health are not connected in any way. We don't understand how to make our spaces help ourselves, help our health, help our mental health, help our nervous systems. We don't understand environments and humanity. We don't know how to marry them to support each other. And we've normalized clutter and chaos. We've normalized constant stimulation and tension. And we've normalized noise. Noise is one that I really struggle to wrap my head around. It's one thing having chill vibe music going on in the background. It's another thing trying to work in an environment that is absolutely overwhelmingly noisy. I remember I had a job as an interior designer working for a company that designed high-end solutions for mostly homes in London, for carpentry, closet cupboards, kitchens, anything to do with built-in furniture, basically. It was all very bespoke, very high-end. It was a lovely, lovely company. But the working environment was impossible for me because it was absolutely overwhelming with the noise because it was above, the offices were above the workroom. So all day long, you had all of the workshop happening underneath, all the stuff being built right underneath you. There was also no natural light in the office. So I went home every day with a migraine. There was also complete visual stimulation with all the samples and the show pieces that were going on in the office. And then there was non-stop clients and meetings all happening in this very open space office. I found that an absolutely impossible environment to get any work done. I went home every day exhausted, completely overstimulated, with a migraine, and just not feeling good at all about anything. And we've become very accustomed to functioning inside very dysregulating environments. And we need to stop and recognize the impact it's having on our bodies. I certainly noticed, I mentioned having a migraine, but lots of side effects that you could have from a poor environment is shallow breathing, inability to settle once you get home, constant restlessness, tension in certain areas of the home and in certain areas of the body, feeling drained after certain spaces, sleep improving in different spaces and being less quality in other places. The body knows an environment is exhausting long before the brain has got there. And you need to listen to your body if it's telling you that. So my job in the world of environments and spaces surroundings is I absolutely love it. It's the missing piece for me because I get to walk into an office space or a home and really meet the people with where they're at and what they need and what that gap is. Because that is really all we're talking about here is an environment, a space, a surrounding has to support the nervous systems that are operating inside of it. And we want the space to set those nervous systems up for success. We want it to be helpful, supportive, safe place for people to operate in and feel held by that space. And a space can do that. A space can do that. This is not about creating Pinterest perfect homes or offices, or controlling every environment that you walk into. I actually was on a different podcast last week, and one of the things that she asked me was, well, how do you deal with if you're working in an office or a cubicle, God forbid, if you're working in an office, how can you make that your own? How can you actually soften that space to be what you need it to be so you can work, you can function well? And I just said, well, even if you're working in a tiny little cubicle like we're from the 80s, you can drape fabric, you can hang pretty pieces of art, you can take a plant, you could take knickknacks, you can hang photos, you can do whatever you want inside that cubicle. You can make that your little sanctuary. And I've always done that. Every home I've lived in, even when I was a student in halls at uni, I made my little corner of the room mine. I made it my sanctuary. I did it how I wanted. I had the things that I wanted on the walls. I just dealt with the consequences after. If I had to get a little bit of filler in a hole I banged into the wall, then fine. I did it in every apartment we've ever lived in, rented or not. I always make my space home. I make it a place I can exhale, that I can relax in, that my body knows is safe. It's taken me a long time to understand some of the why as to why I do that, but I have always done it. And it can be really small things like softer lighting. Lighting is a huge thing. I should do a whole podcast on lighting. It's just the most enormous topic, and I think one of the things that drives me nuts is the use of the ceiling lights in the evenings. Um, if you imagine that your body is, electricity is a relatively new thing in the grand scheme of history. We are used to, our bodies track the sun, and when the sun goes down, that's probably time to sleep. And this is why life in Scandinavian countries has always been stressful on the body, because their seasons are very extreme. But if we're designed to track the circadian rhythms. And if you think about it in very, very basic terms, if you are sitting in the darkness, as in the evening, the sun has gone down, and you put the big lights on that are above you, your body is going to think, the sun has come up. It's above me, it's bright, it's the sun. Now, obviously, logic and intelligence can say, no, it's not. But your natural circadian rhythm will look at that and think, right, it's time to get up. You can't switch your nervous system on and off like you can a light switch. It's going to wake up. And so coming down and going to sleep is going to be far harder if you're on, off, on, off, on, off with all these massively bright lights above your head. If you put lower lighting, both in terms of its brightness, but also its positioning in the room, you will find that your brain is much less switched on and alert at sleep time than if you've used the ceiling lights. It's crazy, but it's totally true. Lighting can make a huge difference to how well you come down at the end of the day, and that affects the quality of your sleep. And that is one of the first things I ask my clients when they tell me that they're not sleeping. I'm like, okay, tell me about your nighttime routine. What does your evening look like, particularly in the winter when the evening is longer? What does it look like? What is your ritual? How are you going to sleep? How are you preparing your body for sleep? And the vast majority of the time, I will tell you this for free. They don't prepare their body for sleep. They just switch the ceiling light off and get into bed, and then they can't sleep. And it's baffling to me that this is very obvious, but apparently it's not. This is the combination of somatics and surroundings, interior design philosophy, and somatics. It's about softer lighting, reducing sensory noise, creating restorative corners. That's one of my favorite things to do. Separating work and rest wherever it's possible, creating visual calm that tells your story. Nervous system safe places. This is one of my pet opposite of peeves. My pets. The things I love to do. Create little moments of quiet where your nervous system knows, that ritual, like I said earlier, about training your nervous system that this is how I come down. This is the place, this is the way, this is the space. And that creates an environment that supports you exhaling. So the goal is never perfection. It's about creating environments that communicate a little more safety and a little less pressure to the nervous system. And I think one of the most important things that we can begin asking is not just who's stressing me out or what's stressing me out emotionally. It's about what are my surroundings communicating to my nervous system every single day? Because healing, rest, regulation, these things don't happen in isolation from each other. And they don't happen in isolation from the environments that we're living in. So perhaps many people are not failing to cope. Maybe their nervous systems have simply been trying to survive in surroundings that never actually allow them to exhale. And if this episode maybe resonated with you, I would love to talk to you about how we can address your home, how we can make some small tweaks. I have online services where everything is sourced and linked and shoppable online. Everything is provided to you in a portal. It's a great service. I absolutely love it. It can make a huge amount of difference to all the things I've spoken about today. Or I go into homes locally. If you know, if you want to learn about where that can happen, you can go on the website. And also take the rest test that's on the website. It does address your surroundings. It does address your environments. It gets you to think about it. How do I feel when I walk into my bedroom? How do I feel when I go into the kitchen? That will actually start training you how to listen to your body. So jump on a rest test and let me know how it goes. And I would love to hear what your concerns are about your spaces, about your homes, how you feel about your surroundings. There is so much that can be done to make those adjustments that give you the ability to come down and to downregulate yourself into a place of that exhale that we're all looking for. So if that resonates, do jump on the website, do drop me a line. There's lots of ways to do it. And I will see you in season 2.